Hello, Paul Ginson here. I wanted to share with you a film I watched recently. I've been a fan of both of these gentlemen's research and work for a number of years. So it's a conversation. There's three people involved. There's a curator in the middle with the conversation, but he doesn't say much in this clip, but I will make sure I put the link to this full conversation so if you find it interesting, you can enjoy it. The reason I'm sharing this clip is they talk about music, they talk about piano playing. But first of all, just let me give you a little bit of backstory. So Iain McGilchrist spent much of his life writing these fabulous books. This is essentially one book. So this first book is called The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. And this is called The Matter with Things, Our Brains, Our Delusions and the Unmaking of the World. Obviously, you can see how big those books are. One small look. So I can't begin to touch the surface about Iain's research regarding the two hemispheres and the corpus callosum and everything else that goes with it. So I would research Iain's book. The Matter with Things is a great book, but you probably should start with The Master and His Emissary if you want to understand a little bit more about why our brains have two hemispheres, why one is slightly bigger than the other. Einstein had a phrase that he said, the intuitive mind, the right hemisphere, was the sacred gift, and the rational mind was the faithful servant. Yet we follow the servant, the left hemisphere, and have forgot the gift, the right hemisphere. So in this conversation, they talk about music, and it's just fascinating because it just raises so many questions. So without further ado, let's have a look at that right now.
I'm a pianist, and so obviously playing the piano involves coordinating the right and the left hand, and the left hand, which mainly does the rhythmic section, as it were, is clearly controlled by the right brain. And the right hand, which does the sort of melody and all the rest, is by the left brain. And in playing the piano, these are coordinated. And how does this map on to your interpretation? I'm sure it maps wonderfully well, but I'd just love to know how.
Well, one of the mysteries is that music is abnormally lateralized in the brain of performers. So in the general population who are not professional musicians or full-time musicians, the only bit of music that is really understood or interpreted by the left hemisphere is rhythm. And melody and harmony are almost exclusively understood and experienced in the right hemisphere. So that seems on the face of it very different from what you're describing. And one of the things is that for most instruments, the two hands need to be coordinated for all these activities. And so when you look at professional musicians, what I've just described is not the case. So they have developed a left hemisphere which is also capable of understanding melody and harmony. And the right hemisphere already actually understands rhythm anyway. In fact, complex rhythms in the ordinary person are understood by the right hemisphere, not by the left. It's only simple rhythms the left can get. The sort of thing that I constantly hear everywhere I go, blaring out of cars on speakers in shops and so on, which is just boom, boom, boom. That is the left hemisphere speaking. But I think what you're describing is an effortful coordination which actually modifies the brain.
I see, because you see, I thought on the basic, my understanding of McGilchrist 101 was that actually the right and left hand should be reversed, and there's no reason why, when the development of piano playing took place, the keyboards shouldn't have been the other way round.
Well, with the deep notes at the top.
Yes, yes, with the keyboard reversed. So you played with the left hemisphere, the right hand would do the rhythm, and the left hand would do the... it could have been exactly the mirror image of the way it is now. There's nothing in the technology that says it has to be that way round.
It's quite right. I never really thought about that. I think that you'd have to have had not just a reversal you'd have to have had the higher notes on the left hand's part of the scale. Yes.
That's right.
The thing is that in the brain there are certain things that are positionally it seems like for example, the sequence from left to right in which things grow is innate in, for example, chicks. They tend to see a series of numbers grows as you move towards the right, which is the way in which we see from 1 to 7. And so we start from lower to higher, and it may be that this is also the way in which it seems fundamentally that the lower notes are basic. They are the base, and the other is what is built more complexly on top of it. And so it may be natural that an instrument developed in this way, but I haven't studied all instruments around the world to see whether or not there's a project for somebody with nothing else to do.
Well, look at Islamic music, you see, because they read from right to left.
Yes.
And so their whole sense of the way things develop.
Yes.
You start at the back of the book by our criteria, and you read from right to left. It's the exact opposite.
Of course.
If pianos had first been developed in the Caliphate in Baghdad or somewhere, perhaps the upper part of the keyboard would have been the lower notes and the rhythm section, and it might have been a mirror image of existing pianos.
It's a hypothetical, but some research, anthropological research, would be interesting.
Yes.
I don't know why it's ended up that way in brief, but that is the way it is. And it's also true, of course, of all instruments. I don't know of any instruments that are just played with one hand. I mean, it's one of the things we do, even with sort of playing a flute, playing a violin. Both hands have to be coordinated, at least in Western music. That is almost a sine qua non. So the hands have to work together in this way, and the brain is modified in those who do it so that it can.
I wonder how much learning the piano. You see, I started learning piano when I was 5. I come from quite a musical family.
Yes.
And my son Merlin learned at 5, Cosmo started learning at 4. And that means from a very early age, I and they and lots of other people have actually been using brains in a way that would be somewhat counterintuitive if they read McGilchrist first. And so does this affect the actual development of people? Do people who learn the piano or other instruments at an early age develop differently? I mean, professional musicians, you said, are noticeably different, but what about amateur musicians who play every day?
Well, of course, the distinction is not between amateur and professional, but between people who are constantly playing and those who are only occasionally playing.
Yes.
So I don't think there's a problem with that. But I would imagine that starting early to learn an instrument like this will modify. Certainly we know in respect of the appreciation of sound that it does modify the brain, and I don't see why it should not modify the brain in other ways. You and your 2 sons have interesting brains that work perhaps slightly differently from the standard Western brain.
Yes. Yes, well, no, that's a really interesting possibility, isn't it? And
I don't know if anybody's done more tests on professional pianists, or I don't know of any.
No, but it would be a good research area from the point of view of brain naturalisation, wouldn't it?
Absolutely would.
But I have seen reports saying that people who learn the piano or other instruments have a different way in which they think and stuff. But it would be an obvious thing to do, because this involves a close coordination of the 2 hemispheres in a way that is. I mean, we need it in every physical activity: walking, running, jumping, sports skills, presumably, playing cricket, playing football, etc. Right and left feet. Presumably all these physical skills involve coordination of hemispheres.
Well, they do, but the difference is that the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere in motor performance each control the other, and there's not there's the distinction that there is between melody, harmony and rhythm, if you see what I mean. So music introduces a whole different aspect.
Yes.
There's no reason to suppose that we should be discoordinated when we move. And animals that have no corpus callosum are perfectly well coordinated.
Okay, so there you go. I hope you find that conversation really interesting. It's fascinating, the idea of thinking about the piano the other way around, which is fascinating to think about, which reminds me of something which is really hard to do actually, but I would advise musicians to try it. I'd probably fail at doing it. Is swap your hands over. Let's say we're going to play something like Let's try a little bit of Mozart. So basically you're going to do the hands the other way around. It takes such a lot of thinking about, because you normally do it that, but you would do it this way around. I wonder if you could apply that to other instruments. I'm sure you probably could. Play it with the other hand, play it the other way around. Please put in the comments if it's something you've explored. I've done some more videos about that in jazz piano, but yeah, crossing the hands, and it requires an amazing amount of effort to do that. Anyway, that's just a thought. Another thought, of course, is sheet music. We could suggest that sheet music is very left hemisphere, it's very mechanistic, written down in lines and order. And so much of the music I'm involved in and play, it's just an oral tradition. You just listen to it and then you copy it and play it. So we must be mindful that sheet music's probably not music. So that's another thing that's interesting to throw into the mix as far as that conversation is concerned. Rupert Sheldrake, I mean, he's fascinating. I've got many of his other books. I've just brought one down, Ways to Go Beyond. This is, again, a fascinating book. And he wrote a book, I think it's called A Science Delusion, which talks about the hypothesis of science, because really it's a finite mind's kind of limited perspective of reality. But we put so much on following the science and all those kind of things, when really it's not an infinite mind. You cannot know how much you do not know unless you're already omniscient. These are finite minds, and you know, Nietzsche said science is a hypothesis, and I think it'd be hard push to argue with him regarding that. The other thing he brought up was, which got me thinking, was I've been teaching piano for so many years now. And as you can see in the film, he's talking about how the brain sort of lateralizes an information across the two hemispheres, and then about the sort of different kind of brains that are formed from doing music through harmony. What was it McGilchrist said, in the right hemisphere compared to rhythm in the left? And then it started me thinking about all the students I've taught over the years, and that adds up to thousands. And I just wanted to share with you this one thing. So if you have a look on the screen there in a moment, I'm just going to read from this book by Hansi Freinack, if he is indeed Hansi Freinack, but that's for you to find out if you're interested in discovering that. This is called The Listening Society. And in here, as you can see on the screen now in front of you, in this book he talks about Michael Commons and his models of hierarchical complexity. So the basic idea of the model of hierarchical complexity is that people are distributed across different stages of hierarchical development, so that people can think thoughts and perform tasks that are more complex than others. The model leads to more rather counterintuitive conclusions that can be hard to swallow, but are shockingly obvious once you've seen them. So it is a model of the way you, not what you think, but the way you come to think about it. Can you think across paradigms? Can you exit the domain you're in and view it from different architectures of thinking? And as you can see in front of you there, there's various different levels. And like the guy says in the book, it's pretty harsh, because you see where you are and you see what your mind can't do. And it's a harsh mistress, is that, to be honest. But then I started thinking about my students, and I was thinking, well, actually, you know, so many of my students that study music do have this kind of imaginative mind that they're able to slip and slide contexts, and I just think that's just really wonderful to see them develop. And so there you can see we have different lists, and you could probably find yourself on that. We have different kind of, so like when we start to get number 15, that means cross paradigmatic stage. In the book it talks about that, like, stage 11 is probably reached between the age of 14 and 18, and if at all. And so most people around, I mean, in society are probably, if we use this model of hierarchical complexity, are probably around a stage kind of 10 or 11. I've invented a word. Wow, does that mean I'm higher up? All right, interesting. I'm not sure I am. So just thinking about music and the way I teach, and the way I see students contact me now who've grown and developed into adults, and the fact that they do have this elasticity in their mind, and makes me think how powerful and wonderful music is. So yeah, that was Hansi Freinack's, looking at Michael Commons, his Hierarchical Complexity. These are interesting books. Again, rich research. It's kind of a scientific experiment where lots of people did different exercises. But yeah, it's a really good film. So please watch the rest of this film if you find it interesting, and please explore some of Iain McGilchrist's and also Rupert Sheldrake's work. He's done some lovely work about your pets know when you're coming home. He's done some amazing research about that. It's completely fascinating. and it shows how much we don't know. So thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos. Bye for now.